How many? Wow. Yeah, you could have Alright, okay, so now, while we're in a plotting mood, I want to take an informal survey of all people who came here to listen to me talk about games and education and the future of education. Out of these three options, cheer for the one which most describes your experience in high school. Number one, I felt that high school prepared me perfectly for everything that I experienced once I got out into the real world of life. Number two, I felt that high school had one or two useful things it offered me, but otherwise was pretty useless. And number three, I found that high school was pretty pointless and in general has no bearing on what I do with my life today. You're not alone in feeling that way. This is a picture of my friend Adam. I'm told that this looks like a planking photo, but actually this happened 6 or 7 years before planking was a thing. He's having a dance competition with the guy on the right there, John, and he's currently serving John by doing the worm, but it looks like he just basically. Okay, that's apropos of nothing. Hi, my name is Steve Swink, and I was asked to come at the last minute and fill in for this talk. And the name of the talk that I was given is Game Design in the Next 50 Years of Education. The talk was actually supposed to be given by this dapper Torontonian. His name is Michael Todd. He's an awesome dude, but he has fallen afoul of U.S. Border and Customs. So he's currently banned from the United States of America. Call your congressperson because that shit is draconian and it's terrible. Anyway, his game is called Electronic Super Joy. You can play it at the Indie Mega Booth, and I highly recommend you go do that. It's badass. Okay, so since it's my talk now, I'm going to change the title to Saving Education with Game Design. And I'm putting on my educational game designer hat, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm only going to make 3 points, just 3 simple points, and these are they. Education is failing us. Games are really good at teaching a lot of the things that education fails us at. And I think that some well-designed games could probably save education, and it could help the world in many ways with some of the problems that we're facing right now. So I'm just going to do a background on me because I assume that no one has any idea who I am. I got my start as a game designer working at this company, Charmer, working on this rather unfortunately untitled Xbox title. It was called The Unseen, and it was in fact never seen. Which is not an uncommon thing in the game industry, but anyway, I was 20, and I showed up one day, and I was the first one to work, and I had my key, and I was like trying to open the door, and it wouldn't work. I hadn't had coffee, and I was so confused, and I was like, what's happening? And the door opens to the other side, and I almost fall down the stairs, and it's the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the company, and she's like, yeah, there's no paychecks, get your stuff, go home. So that was my first experience in the game industry. So I've been working on this game for about 1.5 years, and that happened, and now we're throwing football around and drinking beer in the parking lot at 10 in the morning. So then I got a job as a game designer working on Tony Hawk's Underground. It was a really cool job. I thought at the time, I was really excited, and I was so, more than anything in my life, I wanted to design video games. That's all I've ever wanted to do. So I got there, and like the last game that I worked on didn't ship, and it exploded, and it burned down, and it was terrible. And I got there, and this game is gonna ship, right? Like the Tony Hawk games come out, they come out every year. Maybe not such a good thing in hindsight. But anyway, so we get to the end of it, and there's like this 30-day crunch where we're working, just the most insane hours, like 16 hours a day or something. And I'm like sitting at my desk, I could still tell you the position of all the objects on my desk, like it's completely crazy. But so, I go to bed at 2 in the morning, and I just get up and come back at 8 in the morning. We do this for 30 days, and by the end of it, I'm like so fat, because they just like would bring in crappy food for us, and like it was gnarly ass beard, and my hair was all long, and my clothes were all like ragged because I hadn't had a chance to go shopping or whatever. But man, I'm gonna make my game, I'm gonna put it out, it's gonna be awesome, right? So the game finally comes out, and I go down to Best Buy, right? And I'm like, okay, this is it, man. This is fucking it. I'm gonna watch a kid buy the game, and this is the moment, right? Like, this is it. Here we go. All right. So I'm sitting in an hallway, and I'm waiting at the Best Buy, and these two skater kids come in and have like a chocolate ice cream cone, and they're fighting over it. They're like, man, which game should we buy? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, Tony Hawk. Oh no, that game sucks. And I'm just like, oh god. So anyway, the next week I left, never stopped, and I went and formed an independent game company with some friends of mine in Arizona, and this was a great idea. And I got back in shape. I started doing off-road mountaineering, cycling and stuff. And we made a bunch of games. One was called Off-Road Velociraptor Safari. It's a game where you drive around an off-road Jeep and hit ragdoll velociraptors with it. Anyway, you can raptor that's driving the Jeep. It's a raptor driving the Jeep. Has a pith helmet and a monocle, so it's sort of a civil commentary on British imperialism. The raptors are subjugating the native raptors anyway. Then we made a game called Jetpack Brontosaurus, which I feel needs no other explanation. Then we made a game called Minotaur China Shop, which is about an entrepreneurial minotaur who's up the China shop. But it doesn't go well. Yeah, this particular condition is called Minotaur Rage, but there's a lobby that's sympathetic to his disorder, so he gets insurance money when things get smashed up. You can play all of these games for free on our website, blurs.com. It turns out giving away free games and then later asking people who really like them to pay you is like not the best model. So that company, unfortunately, it's sort of like on hiatus. Like it still exists, but no one's doing anything. So anyway, after that, I made a game called Shadow Physics, which is a 3D puzzle platformer where you play as a shadow, so you're a two-dimensional being in a 3D world, and so you like push the shadows of objects and it would move the objects around. Unfortunately, it didn't really come together the way that we wanted to, so we kind of scrapped it, unfortunately. I may put it out in some form at some point if people seem to be interested in that. Now I'm currently working on this game, which is called Scale. It's a 3D puzzle platformer where you can scale objects up and down as much as you want. And it used to look like this, and now it kind of looks like that, but don't tell anyone because I've shown you this. I also wrote a book called Game Feel, which you might be interested in if you're a game designer and you're interested in like the way that things feel tactilely and how that is developed by game developers and how they think about it. And I also teach a lot. I've taught for 7 or 8 years now. 8 actually. And I've taught at all these places and I've done workshops and so on. So that gives me, they call this establishing credibility. That's what I'm doing right now. It's totally working. Look at the faces. All right. So anyway, for the last year and a half, I've been working on 2 games, and they go into the masthead Atlantis Remix, and it's at the Center for Games Impact at Arizona State University. Actually just left that job to go to work on Scale again, but I'm going to tell you about those 2 games and everything that I've learned as a game designer on educational games, the space of educational games, and sort of like the future of education and why we're kind of screwed right now in this country and what people are trying to do to fix that. This is my parents' morbidly obese cat, Samantha. Okay. Point in your life. If you're like me, you probably were in high school, at least based on that survey that we had earlier. You maybe didn't think that was the greatest thing, but you probably sat in a classroom just like this, staring up at a teacher who's talking to you in a manner very similar to what I'm doing right now, and that teacher might have asked you a question, something like, who is the inventor of the cotton gin? Eli Whitney, all right. We got some people who actually pay attention in school here. This is Dapper Joan right here, so you're totally correct on that. So how about this bad boy? Anybody remember this? Can anybody do me like the atomic weight of lead off the top of your head?
Well done.
Right. Okay. So this is quite a bit harder than regurgitating Eli Whitney, I think. But if you're like me, at some point you had to memorize this bad mother here, and you had to take tests on it, right? But how about this?
Yeah.
You look at this. And
what is this?
Can you tell me what is super effective against dark-type Pokemon?
Fighting.
I heard like 10 people answer.
Fog.
There you go. Fighting bug. Okay, so the problem with education is that teachers, like, if they got everything they want, if everything went perfectly, and every kid was exactly perfect, and they just sat in the row, and they, like in that Simpsons episode with Focus In, where they have all the little mice that are all sitting in the little tiny classroom facing forward. If that went perfectly, if everything went perfectly, essentially what you would have is a teacher downloading the knowledge that they have in their head, or more likely a teacher guide, straight to the brain of the kid, right? And then they want that kid to regurgitate that information for tests at any given moment, right? So it's essentially, they want to treat kids like a memory stick. They want to be able to put all the information on it, and then at any moment they want to get it back off again. And that's not a very good model for education. It's the model of the Industrial Revolution, right? It's basically, you train people to do these kind of white or blue collar jobs by just sort of like force cramming that information in there. And it prepares us for this world that it seems tidy and orderly and perfect and easy to understand. There are rules, there are grades. Grades in themselves are pretty pernicious if you think about it. The expectations that they set up in you, that if you do the work and you show up and you're there and you're present and you do all the homework assignments, even if you do them kind of half-assed or whatever, you're going to get an A. All right. right? But there's no such thing as getting an A in real life, because when you look at real life, for example, maybe the first big decision you made when you got out of high school, which was choosing a college, real life is messy and it's complicated. Everything that people are involved with is messy and hyper-complicated and beyond the understanding of humans. We're inside this giant, complex machine system that is humanity and the environment and the planet and all these pieces working together. So, here's just like a little diagram I made of all the different things that go into choosing a college, perhaps, right? It's like your grades in your high school, and then like US News is this company that primarily makes money off of an invented ranking of colleges, right? And they sell these books, and really, you really think that there's no corruption in that system? You really think that the schools without money are not handing money to them to get a better rating or whatever, right? Like, it's so obvious. There's no oversight in that, right? But if you don't think about that and you just grab the book and you're like, oh, cool, sounds good, I'll go to college X. Or, you just don't even think about whether or not you're going to go to college or how you're going to pay for it. And so I see all these people, all these students that I have, really bright people who all they wanted was a great life. They wanted to improve their lives. They went to college and they got a crap-ass loan. And now they're on the hook for $100,000 with a 16% interest rate, right? Like, they're financially crippled for life, and they can get a great job in the game industry making 70 grand a year, 80 grand a year, a really reasonable salary, and they'll still be living in a one-bedroom apartment and barely able to make ends meet. Even more complex, shit like this. This drives me crazy. Healthcare in this country is fucked. Everyone knows this. Here is the simplest possible diagram I could find of all the stakeholders in American healthcare. So these are really complex systems. These are crazy, right? And knowing Eli Whitney or knowing the atomic weight of lead, that's not going to help you, right? And having the expectation that you can go and learn a bunch of facts, and as long as you remember those facts and you can regurgitate them, you will be able to choose the correct plan for healthcare, and you won't get screwed if you have a broken leg or some terrible illness or something like that, right? That is not a good assumption, and you should not make important life decisions based on that. So, the world is extremely complex. I think that's indubitable. Nobody would argue with that. And I think that we have even worse problems than that at the global scale. We're basically conducting an unsupervised climate experiment on our planet, and it's the only planet we've got. We're screwing it up, right? We're causing all these problems with global warming is happening, like obviously now, not even the crazies think that it's not happening anymore and so on. So education is preparing this generation of people to have no skills at all to deal with these kinds of problems, right? And if you're dropped into a system like this nonsense, you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to shut down. And at some point, you're just going to say, this is not worth it. I got stuff to do. I'm not going to sit here and read through piles of pages of documentation and so on. So this model is just not working for us anymore, right? And when I look at this, being a game designer and knowing now what I know, having escaped from public high school and got quite a bit more education and educated myself in a lot of topics, I just see that, right? It's like the simplest, most inefficient type of information transfer. And it's actually like not the best way to learn stuff, right? This is a way better way to learn stuff, right? Okay, so try to explain Civ to your grandmother. Try to explain what's going on. Okay, it's a simulation of all humanity of all time ever. Like, oh, it's a history lesson. No. It's about how history was formed and how it worked. But you can play as Alexander the Great. Yeah, but he might get his ass kicked by Gandhi. He might get fucking kicked by Gandhi. Wait, that sounds really shitty and violent. She's not going to get it. She's not going to understand it. She would have to play it to understand it. And it turns out that games are really good at teaching people how to interface with extraordinarily complex systems, how to master those systems. So if you play something like Civ, I think there's actually probably some life lessons in Civ that are way better than the life lessons you learn in high school. Because if you look at Civ, Civ has enough complexity that you can't just look at it and do what you want. You have to make decisions at a very low level, thousands of tiny decisions, turn after turn after turn, up late, just one more turn, right? And you have to make all those decisions, right? with some overarching goal in mind, and they have to serve this like meta goal. So I'm going to go for the space race victory. Like I have to optimize all of my low-level decisions for that, and the ability to take this vast sea of information and concatenate it down to a few decisions and turn it into something that really, you've mastered and won the game, right? Like that is knowledge. You have knowledge of that system, just the way that half the people in this room have knowledge of how to defeat a dark-type Pokemon. Because you intimately understand the reason behind that system and how it works. So, that's a weird picture. So I'm thinking about all these things, and I got really down, right? And it's like, well, what can I do? And then, I'm thinking to myself, basically I'm useless, right? Like I make entertainment, I'm a game designer. There's not a lot that I can do about that. But once I sort of got on this track of thinking about how games are really good at teaching, and how games are really good at teaching things that are way more complex than the things that we learn in school, and teaching them way better, and thinking about how, like, if I want to understand what's going on with the periodic table, I have to look it up, and how, I can tell you all this stuff about Civ off the top of my head, I started thinking about, I should do something useful with my life. I should go try to make some impact on this. So I found through connections of my friends, somebody who was working on educational games right where the rubber meets the road, taking games, putting them into schools, and trying to make a difference in the world in exactly the direction that I want to make, which is to make people exit school feeling empowered. They can go out into the world, they can see all these complex systems, they can intervene with them and make things better in the world instead of, just feeling overwhelmed or feeling, apathetic and whatever. So anyway, this university, ASU, they have this huge grant from the Gates Foundation, multiple millions of dollars, to make this educational video game. So I'm going to talk about this game that we made and one other that we mostly made. And unfortunately, I'm on video today. I don't have a playable demo because I had to switch laptops at the last minute. But the video is actually probably better, so I can skip around. Okay. So the big problem in the actual landscape when you try to actually take games into schools, so first off, here, who played Oregon Trail? It's okay, yeah, everyone played Oregon Trail. Even people who don't like it, just played Oregon Trail because it's better than doing whatever else you're doing at the time. Or like Fraction Munchers. Anybody remember that? Yeah, okay, all right. So Fraction Munchers and Oregon Trail are kind of like good attempts in the direction of making educational games. But educational games have evolved so far beyond that now. But the real problem with both of those games and with many other games that people are trying to make right now that they're getting small grants for is that they can't make a game that's big enough to be actually part of the curriculum, right? Because, and I'm going to touch on this many times, the system in which you're operating is fundamentally broken, right? Like I'm looking at the complex system of how teachers and schools function, and it's completely fucked up, and you should feel terrible for your teachers because, they are in a bad way, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But let me show you this game that we made. So the game's called The Doctor's Cure. It has no sound. It has no sound because in a classroom full of kids, you can't have all the kids have headphones on. It just doesn't work. The teacher can't keep control of the class. Everybody goes off on a different tangent. So you start with these basic pieces of the interface. So essentially what you're doing is you are a reporter, and you've come to this town, and this town is being afflicted by a terrible plague, and it's sort of represented by this sort of slime that's on the ground here. And it's a sort of a retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So you have this doctor who is trying to help the town, and he's trying to cure the plague. And it sort of comes out over the course of the game that as he's trying to cure the plague, he's experimenting on a human-like creature, which is the Frankenstein monster, which he may or may not have reconstituted from parts that came from the graveyard. And so essentially what we do is we have the kids walk around and talk to various people, and then they have to collect quotes from those people. And there's just sort of a fun Mario Sunshine spraying mechanic where you can spray away the slime as well, to make it a little bit more interesting. But the spraying and the mechanic sort of goes back and feeds back into the story dynamics that we're trying to do. So this game is about persuasive writing. So all over the place, you're collecting these quotes, and you're, from all these different characters, you have different types of valences. Like some of them are much more biased against or for the Doctor. And so like as you're sort of working your way around, you collect all these different quotes, and you assemble them into this. There we go. Seem to be stuck. Okay. Whatever. I'm gonna scroll. Whatever. Okay. So this is the evidence evaluator essentially. So you have to go and plug in the pieces of your thesis here. So you have these quotes that you collected from people, and you have to plug them in. You have to match them to the reasons that you have collected from various people, and it's not at all easy. And that was really important. And like even to this day, if I play this game after playing it thousands of times, what I have to do is stare really hard at this and think really hard about whether or not we need Dr. Frank, because he is our only hope, is supported by Dr. Frank cured the deadly cuddle disease. Right? And that's not easy to make that leap, and it's especially not easy for kids. But when we talk to teachers in classrooms about the problems that they were having with persuasive writing with kids who were writing, it was that they couldn't make the connection between a piece of evidence and the reason. So we really focused down on that, and we tried to make that work. Now, this game is not intended to be supplemental curriculum. It's not meant to be Oregon Trail or fraction lectures. It's not meant to be you go to the computer lab to give the teacher a break so they don't have a heart attack, right? It's meant to be a part of the curriculum. It's meant to be a textbook, essentially, and it's meant to replace a chunk of text with this game. And we did it that way because of budgets and the way the budgets are in schools. You just can't like get budget funding for many extracurricular activities, and they're like really hotly contested. But if you start going in and you start actually addressing core curriculum standards like persuasive writing, then you can do this. This character right here, Scoop, the editor of the newspaper that you write for. So basically what you do is you end up writing into the game, and you write a newspaper report, and the newspaper comes out. And so you see your words written come up in the newspaper. And this character, Scoop, is actually played by the teacher. And this was one of the things that we really found was one of the biggest problems that no one had addressed in the educational space, which is that teachers get bored or uninterested, and they have so many demands on them all the time that they can't like be expected to master a game and understand it without it being fun and interesting for them as well. And that I thought was one of the most important pieces of information that we got that I would share with everybody. It's like, like if you don't engage the teachers as well, then you're sort of failing. So we made this whole crazy like teacher toolkit thing. It kind of looks like Facebook, because almost every teacher ever uses Facebook for everything. And it lets them like track the progress of each student. It lets them watch things happen in real time, and it lets them play as these characters in the game. So this would be, I created in that tool on the left there all of my reasons and evidence, and I put them all together, and then I wrote on the right there, as a student, an article that goes into the newspaper. And you notice it's not like a traditional 3-paragraph essay. It's an actual piece of writing like you might read on the web or something. So, yeah, so here's the back-end interface where the teachers can like watch everything happen in real time. It turns out this is really fun for them, and we did a lot of testing and design to try and make sure that there was something entertaining for the teachers and the students to do that made things kind of work for them. Okay, so this brings me back to the real, oh yeah. You'll find one under each of your seats. We have 20 minutes to finish this test. So this is the bane of the existence both of teachers and of the education system generally. So the problem is, how do you measure how educated someone is? How do you measure the quality of an education? The only solution that anybody seems to have is standardized testing. In my opinion, the way to measure whether or not someone is educated is by what they can do, what they can make, what they can create, right? And I think that should be the main metric of the way that we look at what people are doing. I think we should teach everyone how to program for starters. But if you're a writer or an artist or anything like that, I think that should be held up as highly as whether or not you can pass a math test. Or if you're doing math, then do something with that math. Like those kids who launched that rocket that had the camera on it and then like dropped it down back out of orbit, and they recovered the camera and had the footage or whatever. That's awesome. right? Totally not supported by their school as far as I know. It had nothing to do with their schooling, just something cool that they did, and it had this huge impact on their life because everyone loved that video and so on. But anyway, the problem with standardized testing is that teachers get fired if the kids don't pass the test. Not only that, not only do the teachers get fired, the school starts to lose funding. It starts getting put on the No Child Left Behind list, right? That's fucked up. And there's this whole system of tenure within teachers, right? So the young, enthusiastic teachers who are really excited, they're the ones that go first when the budget gets cut. So standardized testing is the worst thing that's ever happened to education. And it again reinforces this idea that the world is simple and orderly, and if I just write my little pencil marks with the correct type of pencil in the right little boxes, everything's going to be okay for me. So now I want to tell you a little bit about how this game turned out when we actually put it into a classroom. So there's this really wonderful and remarkable district out in Tucson, Arizona called Sunnyside. And this is kind of unprecedented, and this is why we're working with them, because they're becoming this interesting model for how you can radically transform the existing system into something that looks a hell of a lot better. Sunnyside is a highly at-risk district. Over 70% of the kids who go to school there have subsidized lunches. 50 or 60% have English as their second language, right? These kids, most of them, probably, statistically speaking, are not going to go to college of any kind. Their parents don't have the money for it, they don't have the grades for it, they, are just not going to be able to do that. So this district, looking at themselves as one of the worst districts in Arizona, which is like the 48th state for education in the United States. And by the way, when you're looking at statistics like that, make sure that you do dig in and don't just do the Eli Whitney thing and know the one fact answer, like actually try to dig in and understand the systems that are at play. How is that ranking done? Who does the ranking? What are their interests? Who do they care about? What political connections do they have? Where is their money coming from? And so on and so on and so on. But anyway, that tangent aside, Sunnyside, this impoverished community out in the middle of the desert, got together and raised $16 million so that every single kid in every single school in their thousands of kids district could have a laptop. And not only could they have a laptop, but they could have a proper IT infrastructure to support all of those laptops and all the software and hardware for 10 years. They got a budget for 10 years into the future. And on top of that, yeah, it's awesome, it's amazing. And so they sort of like bootstrap themselves up out of nothing. So here's an essay written by an English second language kid into the Doctor's Cure. I don't know, man, this is good stuff. You don't have to read the whole thing, obviously, but you should know that it's really good. And this is from a kid who never writes. The teacher said he's never written. She couldn't believe when she saw what he had written. And this is the power of the game. And the game's not even that good. I mean, we did our best with it. There's only 6 of us. We tried to make it so that the graphical quality was at least comparable with something that they might have also played at home. It's not just done in Flash with simple graphics, right? We made an effort. You have a character, you run around, we made an avatar creator. We don't have very many pieces for it, but the kids seem to be able to put together enough to make it feel like it's theirs. But this is great stuff, and we try to, I'm going to do questions at the end. Okay. Yeah, yes, anything you want. So this is like flabbergasting, and part of it is because it's a video game, but part of it is because we thought about how to get the kids engaged. And I'm going to skip ahead, and I'm going to show you this really quick. So the guy that I work with, this dude right here on the right, his name is Sasha Baruch. He's a PhD, who writes a bunch of books about games and education, thinks a lot about it. He's sort of the driving force behind putting all this Atlantic Region stuff together. He had this theory of transformational play. And I'm not going to do like the full academic spiel on the theory here, but the basic idea is that you want to give people, kids in particular, the ability to change the world that they're in, right? You want to give kids the ability to change the environment that they're in and to feel that they're empowered in that environment. So you can take a bunch of kids and you can take them down to like the reservoir here, or you can take them to a park or something, a national park, and you can sort of turn them loose. But you can't have those kids like tinkering with the water quality parameters of the park, or like deciding who gets to stay or leave, right? You can send it, you can have a kid and you can describe to them there's a plague in this town, and there's a problem with that, but obviously they can't change that because they're kids, right? But in a game, you can do all of that stuff, right? And so that's the idea, is that you give the kids the ability to change stuff in the world and let them do stuff. And of course, to me, I'm just like, that's good game design, right? Right? That's how you make a good game. You let people feel like they're able to change things. You make people feel as though they have context, which makes their actions meaningful. So in our case, what we're trying to do is trying to make it so that people in the world were really responsive to what the kids would do. So in the world of Plague at Ingolstadt, the name of the town, you write a persuasive article for the newspaper which decides whether or not all of the people in the town will vote for kicking the doctor out of town and stopping the experiments or against it. And it's pretty dark, actually, because if you kick the doctor out of the town, half the townspeople that you've been talking to the whole time die, and you revisit the town, so you really see the consequences of your action. On the other side, if you vote for the doctor, the creature, which displays many human-like characteristics and is friends with a little girl, Tina, in the town, she calls him Tim, and she plays with him, and he saves her from something. You find him dead because he was experimented on over and over and over again by this doctor, right? And so it becomes this not at all cut and dried ethical quandary, and the kids get really wrapped up in it and they go crazy. So you can see by this essay that this kid who never writes, who has English as a second language, really spent a long time thinking about this and wrote a fair amount of stuff. And then the last part is sort of legitimacy, right? They have to feel like this context has some transfer to the real world. And I think from a game designer's perspective, what that means is that we don't pull any punches. We make this an actually complex system that's actually hard to figure out. And that's why I designed that thing where you drag those pieces around and you have to really do it and it's actually hard. Because if we're not going to actually teach these kids how to do that, then what the hell is the point, right? We're not going to teach them how to defeat a dark-type Pokemon, then why are we even bothering to do this, right? And I think that's another problem with educational games. They tend to be way too easy. Oregon Trail is not super easy, but many educational games err too far on that side. So this is the other game that we made. It's called The Mystery of Tiger River. And this one I think actually does the job quite a bit better. This is a game about systems thinking. It's literally mostly about thinking about really large, complex systems, how to interface with them, how to change them, how to impact them. I'm going to show a little bit of Taiga. This is a prototype version that the artist would be very sad that I'm showing because that you saw that screenshot looks quite a bit better. So anyway, in this river, all the fish are dying, and that's the problem that's set up for you. You're brought into this world as a water quality scientist. That's your identity. That's the legitimacy that you have in this world. So you talk to the ranger character, Mr. Bartle, and he has been charged with taking and figuring out the problem of why all the fish are dying. And it's causing all these problems with the park, with the ecology of the park, but also with the economy of the park, because there are three major stakeholders in the park. There are the fishers, the farmers, and the loggers. So there's a logging operation on the premises. There's a fishing, resort that you can go to and do fishing, and there are farmers who are maybe getting algae into the river, and they're green organic farmers. So they're using special fertilizer and stuff, but there's evidence that maybe this is not going so well. So what we did is we made a simulation of water quality. So you can see there on the left, there's all these different factors that go into water quality, and I won't go over all the factors, but the idea is, essentially, I give you these fish, and this is a virtual fish tank, so you're given this cool tool. You're a remixer, so you come from this sci-fi space where you're kind of quantum leap, you're injected into the world to solve problems, and then you come back, that's your ongoing identity, so you're injected into the world of plague to save people from the plague, and then you're injected into the other world. Anyway. So you get this cool virtual fish tank, which lets you test whether or not the fish are going to die. So you get these goals, and we thought it'd be funny if the goal was to actually kill the fish. So you're sussing out what the hell's going on with the pH of the water by killing the fish. Or actually, no, it's the turbidity in this case. Okay, so you can watch the population of the fish at the top there, and the poor little digital fish keel over, right? But the idea is that Okay, so I'm not going to give you a lesson on water quality, but essentially, up to a certain level, turbidity has no effect on wildlife at all. Turbidity is like dirt in the water, particulates in the water that don't sink to the ground, right? They're kind of dirty water, I guess is the way. But at a certain point, turbidity will really cause temperature to skyrocket, and there's like a pretty narrow band within which fish live. And so if the temperature goes over a certain amount, then the fish dies. So what you just watched happen was the turbidity went up, the temperature went up, all the fish died. Now, what we did is make this little mini game, so it's like an unlock, right? So you just unlocked a model, which is turbidity greater than 22 ATU, blah, 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 can increase temperature in the river. Oops. And so then we have this interface called the chain of reason tool, which is basically like a hypothesis builder. So you put together your models into a chain of reason that works. So cutting down trees, so you're trying to prove whether or not the Build-Right logging company is responsible for all the fish dying. So cutting down trees within 2 meters of the riverbank, blah, 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 and then that looks into this and into that and into that, and you hit this sort of test button, and then you can see how well that worked, that model that you came up with. And you can like take photos, there's this like virtual photo mechanic where you can like scan stuff, and you can use that as pieces of evidence that you can tack on that gives more weight to your claim and so on and so on. And you can like scan water samples from various points in the river and so on. Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, so I designed this whole crazy system behind this. So here you have the fish population, and you can change the fish population, and that will change all these other factors in the park revenue and so on. And so it turns out at the end of all this that the fish are dying because of mostly harmless activities by all three in combination. And so the solution to this is like it's a hyper-complex system, and you can look at this and see that it's pretty complex, right? Like these are all these different parameters that are going into the simulation. But you also need to keep the park open, right? Like because if the park gets closed and the land gets sold and everything goes bad and Ranger Bar loses his job, so that's like the consequentiality in this world and what you really care about. So I can see that everybody's completely tired of hearing me talk about these games. But I think that these are interesting examples of how things could go. And here's another like really awesome report by a kid who never writes stuff, and like this stuff is crazy. I'm really happy with this. Like this fills my heart with joy. It's like the kid, he's like thinking about the distance to the riverbank and how far away the loggers have to be pushed and what the regulations have to be. Oh yeah, and there's like regulations, so there's like this elaborate screen of it's like auto scrolling thing is driving me bananas. Whatever. I'm tired of your video. You're a drunk video girl. This is not my laptop, I apologize. I was going to show actual demos, but my laptop apparently no longer outputs video, which I learned this morning. Good to know. But anyway, yeah, the kids have this interface, and they get to decide how to regulate each of the members of the park. So it's a really complicated situation. It's like, okay, you actually have to like type in, okay, the loggers can log within 200 meters of the riverbank, or 1,000 meters, or and you can actually, if you do the simulation here on my crazy spreadsheet thing, which runs in the background of the game, you can see that if you push them really far, the logging company really far away from the riverbank, then they get far fewer trees, which means that they have far less revenue, which means that possibly the total income for the park drops below the sustainable level and it falls away. And so the idea was basically to not pull any punches, to really make this simulation extremely complex. Okay, so anyway, that's another really awesome report by a kid who never writes stuff, and he's obviously actually internalized this stuff in the way that you would with like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. And that's a point that I always try to make to people, like when they say, oh, my kid's just wasting all their time, they're just playing Pokemon or whatever. Like, okay, that's a good game, right? Because that is some complex shit. If you ask them about that game, if you ask them about what they're doing, oh yeah, no, I'm like, farming this particular Pokemon in a particular area, it has a drop rate of such and such and such. How the hell do you know that, right? You're talking about an 8-year-old. It's awesome. That's what people do. They drastically underestimate how smart kids are and their capacity for understanding stuff if you give them the right tools to do so. Okay. So just to wrap up here, and then we'll take some questions, because I sort of like did a narrow focus talk, and I talked about games that I worked on, and I'm sure people have questions about like sort of broader stuff. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and this is just to give you a background on the landscape of what we're actually trying to deal with, like where the rubber meets the road, where we're actually trying to change education. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is really interested in education. They put a bunch of money into developing the core curriculum. Oh, hey, I had a slide here, fresh lunches. Why is that not earlier? What has happened here? Okay. So they put a bunch of money into the core curriculum standards. Core curriculum standards means that every school in the entire United States for the first time in like 200 years is going to sign on that, yes, these are the subjects we're going to teach, these are the competencies that we're going to teach, and unfortunately, these are the things that we're going to test people on, and this is how we're going to apportion funding. So here's yet another complex diagram representing something in the real world that you would be unprepared for if you just went to school and thought that was how things worked. So what I'd really love to see is I'd really love to see this game get rolled out to more than Sunnyside Elementary School. We did a pilot program with 2,000 kids and ran them through it, and we did what's called a comparison study, which is what you have to do if you want to like prove that your thing is teaching kids and you show learning gains and so on. It basically means you have one classroom full of kids that get taught normally, and then the other classroom do our game, and which one do they prefer? Gee, I wonder. Right? It's kind of a softball thing, right? But then they also like quiz them hardcore about what their competencies are. Tell us about water quality, then they give you a test on that. And the kids who played our game, they know that way better than the kids who don't. So that makes me really happy, and I'd really love to see that become a part of the curriculum across the entire United States. And if it gets adopted as part of the core curriculum standards, what you may see is that you show up for school, or maybe you don't show up for school because you can just log on, and you play these games. And I'm not going to say that we should take away all schooling and all structure, right? Because there are some things that games don't teach well. Social skills come to mind, depending on the game, obviously. Right? Board games and so on are good for social skills, I think. But you should get kids in classroom for at least some portion of what they're doing. But I think that some huge part of it can be way better taught by turning kids loose in this virtual environment where they're free to fail, where they're free to screw things up, to break the world, to destroy the climate, to do these things and see the consequences of them and understand what they mean and to deeply internalize. Because in this country, in education, failure is the worst thing. A mistake is the worst thing that you can make, right? Like, your teacher asks you, who is Eli Whitney? If you don't know, you don't say it, because you don't want to be wrong. And it happens over time, right? Like, we started as kids in kindergarten, everybody was like finger painting and making stuff and having fun. And over time, it's more and more and more, sit your ass down, face forward, listen to what I'm saying, and then barf it back to me like you're a hard drive, right? And that's just not the way the world works, and it's not going to work for us. And if we're all going to have kids, and we want these kids to have a fucking world that's not just destroyed and polluted, we're going to have to prepare them to try and exist in this world. And we have no idea what the world's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, let alone 50 years, right? And we already have like New York flooding from global warming and so on. And so these are big problems, big, tough problems that we need to solve. And the only way that we're going to be able to solve them is if we prepare people to interface with complex systems. And there's a ton of other stuff I could say about education and other things education could do, the things that it kind of does well, the things that it could do much better, but this is what I chose to focus on here. So I would like to see a lot less of this and a lot more of that at school, so that we can fix this stuff and not leave a busted-ass version of this for these guys. All right, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, sure. I'm just doing myself. Okay, you ready?
We have a mobile mic stand if you want to ask questions. I'm just going to leave you with this. This was not my talk today, but
Excellent.
programming is literacy for the digital age. If you don't know how to program, then you really need to learn how to program. And if you're going to have kids, you should definitely teach them how to program because it's only going more in the direction of creating a program with the people who have power over what's happening in the world and are able to affect it. So if you don't know how to program, you should seriously look into learning how to program. And it's the hardest thing you will ever learn. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, right? There was that video that went around recently with Bill Gates and like various basketball players and so on saying that programming is fun and easy. It's not easy. It is fun. And you should do it. But more importantly, it teaches you how to think, like the Steve Jobs quote here says. It teaches you how to think. It teaches you that when you look at your crazy spaghetti diagram of healthcare, that there is a way for you to crack that problem and understand it and look at it, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. All right. She had her hand up in the middle of the talk, so I will go to her first. Everybody awake? All right, here we go. Anybody want to fight a bear?
Technical difficulties.
She crashed the microphone. All right, anybody, well, just ask your question and I'll stay back.
The games that you helped design, the children wrote reports afterwards.
Yeah, and the children wrote into the game. So, and I forgot to mention this stuff. This is a really important point. Okay, so the teacher plays as the editor of the newspaper. And, sorry, she asked the kids wrote reports as part of the game. So the teacher plays the editor of the newspaper, and the teacher is, the kids know that character is the teacher, but when they're writing to the character of Scoop Perry, especially if you have a good teacher who's really invested and bought into the system, it will reply and edit the things that the kids submit, the articles, as Scoop Perry. So we have this whole editing suite inside the teacher backend tools that shows up in the game, and it's Scoop telling you you've got edits on your thing and you need to fix these before we can send this to print, right? And it's like, oh my god, the teachers love it so much because they hate giving kids like shitty graded stuff because the kids then resent them and they lose them. But in here, it's like, oh, God, that Scoop Perry is an asshole. I don't like him. It's perfect. And it gives them permission to fail because they're not on trial. It's not a paper with a big fat red F on it. It's in the game. It's part of the character. It's part of the context of the world. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask about that? Okay.
Okay. So I know you said that from reading it, it was easy to tell that the child had internalized the information. Mm-hmm. But particularly in the persuasive writing game, how much of that was copy-pasted? Because writing is a hard thing to teach.
Yeah,
and using your
really
own
hard.
words is hard. And children just naturally want to copy-paste. Because it's easy, it's already there.
Yeah. They don't have the ability to copy-paste the quotes that they've collected from people directly. They have to reword it as part of the system, and we need to think about that. It's not perfect because they will often paraphrase things that they saw, but the primary thing that we're looking for in that particular game is that they make the correct connections between the reasons and the evidence and then infer their own point about it. And not every kid gets it on the first time, but for the most part, what we found is in that system, that seems to happen. And teaching literacy through a video game is just like an unbelievable nightmare of a design challenge, as I can tell you. But we focus way down just on persuasive writing, just on the idea that the strength of your argument is how well you support your claims with evidence. And so then in that case, it worked out pretty darn well. Yes, and I agree. But I think that piece of writing is actually much better than a standard 5-paragraph essay that you see most kids write. And this is something I found out, working on this game that I had no idea. The 5-paragraph essay is bullshit. I didn't know that. That blew my mind. That is a construct. And it makes sense now because if you have 40 kids in a class and you're the teacher, what do you want to do? You want to look at the paper and say, yep, 5 paragraphs, yep, transitions, yep, done. I'm done. I've taught, right? Grading is the worst part of teaching. It's terrible. It is the worst. So if you ever felt like your teacher didn't do like the best job grading, it's not because they didn't like you, it's because they were up at 2 in the morning and they just graded 39 other papers that said the exact same thing. Yeah, why don't we sort of cruise over that side of the room? That gentleman right there. Gentleman with the glasses and the Argyle expert.
This is a super dry question. Is there a study associated with this? And if so, is it going to be published?
Okay, yes. I don't know where it will be published. I know that you can go to atlantisremix.org, or you can look up the Center for Games and Impact. Let me just do a little search. Oh, no, I can't tell the screens right now. It was a comparison study, so if you know what that means and you know how to interpret comparison studies, that will make more sense to you. Holy crap, I spelled it right. Okay, just start grabbing people. Like, let's get this guy right here and then move over to that side.
Yeah, I was just, you mentioned the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I know they're funding sites like Khan Academy. Do you think that goes far enough with where things are at now, or is that still too much like the reward pass-fail type system? I don't know if you've used it at all.
Yeah, I think Khan Academy is really good. I think that another part of education that needs to be something that we do going forward is watching videos and like understanding them and you know, like not just having your teacher teach you everything, because not all teachers can teach all subjects as well, and they're often better in a support role. Like, and I think if you have someone like the people who make videos for Khan Academy, who is a subject expert who can make a really compelling, interesting video that explains things really well, I think that's really good. There are many systems in development right now which are intended to provide in-time content delivery, which means I am doing a Khan Academy thing, and then I get kind of tested on it. Like I watch the video, and then I do the exercises, and I fail the exercises. Now the system recognizes that, and brings in supporting exercises which are intended to bring me back up to the point where I can succeed on those exercises. And there are a lot of people who are trying to write an automated system for doing that. I still think like a teacher in a classroom is going to be better at providing that as long as they're not completely overwhelmed by 100 students. They're going to be better at providing that kind of information. But yeah, I don't think Khan Academy is bad. I think that some of these attempts to gamify learning are getting into places that are not so good. But I mean, you know, we've all played games where it's very obvious that they took an existing game and just shoehorned whatever content into it. I think that is totally wrong-headed, and that's a naughty designer. They probably were being paid, you know, like very little money. They had to get it done quickly and to get out the door, so it's not like I blame them for that. But if you're going to do this thing right, you need serious money, because making games costs a lot of fucking money. And making games right. And if you're going to do this right, you need to sit down with the subject experts, and you need to really learn the content and love it and understand it. So like water quality, all I did for a week was read about water quality and talk to some of the amazing, amazing people on ASU campus who are subject experts in water quality and earth sciences and so on. I answered your question and then talked more. Okay, so let's get somebody from this side there. How about that who's way over there? There's no one who will answer all these questions, but I'm going to do my best. You guys can talk to me in the corridor after this and stuff. Also, if you don't leave.
I was wondering if the games are available for download or trial?
Yes. I'm not sure. I will have to double check that. I know that anything that is available for download is at atlantisremix.org. The interesting thing about these games, though, is that if you download them and you try them, the experience that you're going to have is actually not going to be that great, because this is an integrated curriculum. We didn't only design a game, we designed all this stuff around it meant to support the teacher. So there's like a printout that you get, it's like their water quality handbook, so as you're going around you can like write down different pieces of the water quality, right, and you keep that with you, and that's yours to have. And then the teacher has all these materials that they get about when they should introduce certain things and when they should pause the class. And we have this really neat design space where we have all these kids who are sitting together and they don't have headphones on and they're sitting next to each other looking at each other's screens. So we can do really fun things, like we can insert game mechanics where the first kid to reach something like pauses everyone else's game and then everyone like, comes around and becomes like a discussion, or the teacher can do that through their interface. They can pause everyone's game at a certain point and then they all turn around and discuss a certain thing, or the teacher can introduce different elements, and that's the kind of game design stuff we're trying to head towards. I wonder if no, I don't think I see that out. But I was going to show you some of like the teaching materials, but you've seen the materials before. Okay, let's see this gentleman right here. I've just had his hand up for a long time.
First off, I want to say I have like 12,000 questions, which is just a testament to how well you're talking.
Oh, thank you.
The only question I'm going to ask is, to what degree past the game does it extend back into the community? So in terms of the water quality study, is there a built-in curriculum to then go and examine, say, a water treatment plant in the area? Or is there encouragement for that? Did you find that the teachers wanted to do that, the students were more engaged to learn about what actually is going on in their communities past that point?
So what I find is that teachers want to survive. And that's just the reality of it, and you can't blame them. The way that we treat teachers in this country is frankly appalling. What we pay them is appalling. The way that they're expected to behave, it's more like a system that gives rise to teachers being treated like dirt. But to answer your question, we do want that desperately, and we have talked about all kinds of different models, and we try to look at the most effective models, like the Eagle Scouts, for taking people, making them the type of person who. Hey, there you go. You can do a video game as an Eagle Scout project. You can make a video game. All right. Anyway, so we started looking at things like the Eagle Scouts, which are effective models of getting people to participate in the community and so on. And we started looking at like a system to bolt on top of this that would run through the game, that would give you lots of opportunities to do stuff. So like in the game, you do the water quality thing and you get this special tool, and it's a special mechanic that lets you test the water and like the fish tank and play around with stuff. Okay, so now there's a hub world that you can go back to. The kids can log out from home anytime they want to, and they can do any number of different water quality related activities using the skills that they have learned. And the tool that they've been given, which embodies the skills that they've learned and so on. What we want to do is, on top of that, have them visit water treatment plants, start looking at ways that they can use less water and innovate and so on, like extend it out into the real world. And that's really like the holy grail, right? Like if you can take a kid, teach them all the stuff about water quality, and then bam, put them out into the real world, like, oh man, that'd be so amazing. Can you imagine an entire generation of people that were doing stuff like that? Yeah. Yeah.
That seems to me like what you're wanting to people, how they will actually see things.
Yes.
And then once we take it to that level, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yes. And that's the problem that I see with a lot of these like gamified experiences. It's kind of and then like, it seems like what you're actually building is just another reward schedule, time eater kind of thing, but it has like an environmental theme. All right, let's get this dude here with the yellow glasses. I think, do we have time for one more question after that, or is this the two?
So my question is more from an infrastructure requirement for these kind of games. One of the first things to get cut in most education situations is the IT budget. And when you're deploying, 3D model games and stuff that may require, some decent horsepower from graphics processor or something like that. How are you? What's the deployment platform? What is the tool that's allowing them to work from home? Now, I guess in this case, you guys use laptops, so that was probably kind of a win, but how would you propose that a school district that is struggling with a really poor kind of success rate with their students, where IT's like not even on the roadmap, how would they deploy a solution like this? Because aside of like the $16 million grant for laptops, like how would you do it?
Well, it actually wasn't a grant; it was raised by the community.
Oh, that's even
like they passed a ballot measure.
Wow.
To raise their own taxes, to raise $16 million in this impoverished community. It's flabbergasting, it's amazing, it's wonderful. But that's the exception, not the rule, obviously. Yeah. So there's a bunch of parts to the answer to your question. One is that a lot of school districts are buying iPads. And Apple is making that cheap and available and trying to support that, which is really cool. Another answer to your question is that there's an educational version of Steam that's being created, which will solve a lot of the updating, installation, patching kind of problems out of the box. Also provides a reasonable framework potentially for something Eagle Scout-y to bolt on top, some sort of achievement system that goes on top of things. But I mean, we're using Unity to make this game, and which means that we get Mac, Windows, Linux, and then we also get iDevices, all of we buy several licenses, but more or less we can port over. But I mean, yeah, it's essentially it's just a really tough problem, and what it needs is a team of people to help whatever district get stuff installed. And the previous iteration of this game went out to like 60,000 kids or something like that, and they actually hit a point where they just couldn't scale it anymore, and now it's a big problem. So we've thought a lot about those problems. I don't know if we have perfect solutions. I think it's just going to be the kind of where as it ramps up, we get different solutions to different problems. But I think the iPad thing is actually pretty huge, because the horsepower of an iPad is pretty crazy, actually. And the game that you saw, both of those games, like this gorgeous looking game, actually, oops, I mean, this runs on a really crappy machine. Like, it runs on a school level machine. Like, that's what we're testing out. We went to a bunch of these schools and we're like, give us your worst computer. No, don't wipe it. We want all the shit on there, right? Let's find out whether or not this is going to work. And so we optimize it for that. And it doesn't run great, it runs like 15 frames a second, but it's playable. It's playable, and the kids can get the message. And I mean, you would be shocked how happy kids are to play a game that's not just Flash graphics launchers. Okay, the rest of you guys who have questions, I'll be happy to talk to you in the hallway. Thank you so much for coming.